Lead with Jake Tapper.
I thought you were right behind me.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Do you call them caramels or caramels? Whatever you call them, caramels.com makes 26 mouth-watering flavors that are the freshest and softest caramels ever produced. Try them for yourself or someone you love. Go today to caramels.com and see for yourself.
This is the story of the one. The one who believes being prepared is not just a way of life. It's how he helps everyone stay safe. He sweats the small stuff before it becomes big stuff. For the one, being an unsung hero in a building full of everyday heroes is just how he likes it. The industrial-grade products you need delivered fast. Call, click Grainger.com or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our
The
income.
Biden administration.
Our friends sold their
is
policy to help pay their
throwing
medical
Joe
bills.
Biden under the bus.
Got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I'm skeptical. So I did some research
that I
and
look
called
forward to
Coventry
this.
Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable
massive
asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew?
I cannot wait.
We sold our
If you're in
policy.
here on X,
Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-651-0200. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
You want to close out?
Should I? Normally I'd hold, but taking the gains is smart here. Right?
Feel more confident with stock ratings from JP Morgan analysts in the Chase Act. When you've got a decision to make, the answer is JP Morgan Wealth Management.
Join Planet Fitness today and get everything
Sorry.
you need for just
Getting,
$1 down. $15
notifications
a month,
from
cancel
YouTube
anytime.
minimize
Deal ends July
encoder
18th.
settings
Made
in
it.
streaming software.
Clean body wash with scents
Think
you
we'll resolve the
love.
issue.
Decision to make, the answer is JP Morgan.
Leg thigh fry, leg thigh fry. It's a deal so nice you have to say it twice. This always fresh, hand-breaded, boldly seasoned meal is now only $5.99 at Bojangles.
You guys
Swing the
excited?
deal, add a pie to your leg thigh fry.
Is that
And when
fun?
you hear this rhyme, you know it's bow time.
If you wouldn't mind, share the stream. I'm going to continue making sure this is a solo
curiously strong
operation.
mints.
So make sure that the stream helps on
It's so easy to
YouTube
get your windshield
is
replaced
good.
using Safe
Trying
Light.
to go
Tell
live
people
on
I
Rumble
am.
too, but
Started off
X
as
is
a
the
ship, and
priority.
it just keeps going.
But
So what do
as
we do
a-
now? I've
someone
scheduled
who
an appointment at
intends to be a
SafeLight.com.
content creator.
Safe Light
or has some
Repair.
kind of
Safe Light
political
Replace.
option. Some would say a Harry Sisson for the Make America Great Again movement. You got to do what you got to do, and when you work
I'm Lauren
alone,
Fox
you
on
have
Capitol
to
Hill, and
multitask, which
this
is fine.
is
So
CNN.
we're going to take notes.
We continue
on
counting down to President
Biden press
Biden's
conference.
very significant news conference. The whole world
Here
will be
we go.
watching, allies of the United States, enemies of the United States, and President Biden's Republican opponents. CNN's Phil Mattingly has been working his sources. Thanks so much for joining us, Philip. What's the Trump campaign looking for in Biden's news conference? I assume mistakes, flubs.
Sort of. It's interesting. I was talking to a prominent Trump surrogate just a couple of hours ago and kind of asked this exact question. And the first thing I got back via text was a popcorn emoji. I think there's
Guys,
certainly
if
some
you could,
significant
share the
interest
stream.
in watching
Let's
it.
watch this
But
together.
keep in mind, it's
I'm
not
stoked.
necessarily something a campaign would want.
I
That
said
just
this
4
at the
months
beginning
before an
of the stream.
election,
There
they
weren't,
may have to
but a couple
totally
people
change their strategy about who
Biden
their opponent is
administration
going to be.
has
I think the best case scenario, as it was laid out from the
full-
Trump
well, the
campaign
Democrat
perspective,
Party
but
has
from
gone
Republicans'
full
perspective,
throw
in terms of what would
Joe
happen
under the
tonight,
bus. Ties
is
hands,
nothing
ties
that is
legs,
so
duct
dramatic
tape over
to
his mouth.
replicate what we saw during the debate,
bowl of
which they
applesauce
feel
right in
would
front
speed
of
up
him as the
Democrats
bus
trying to
drives
get
right
the
up,
president
right
not
over
to
him.
run. But nothing that
These are
totally turns the
dark
tide in
times
terms
for
of
the
impression
Democrat
of who he
Party.
is or
That's
how
what
he
we
is.
get to
Basically,
enjoy.
they want everything in the
cinema
Democratic Party
that
to
is
keep
the Joe
muddling
Biden
along
presidency.
in
And
the
we get
kind
to
of
watch the
intra-party
horror
fratricide
movie
we've
of
seen
our
over the
country.
course of the last 12 or 13 days for as long as it possibly can.
Well, they're running against the right party. What you're reporting squares exactly with what our friend Tim Alberta writes in The Atlantic. He's been covering the Trump campaign for the last few months. He writes, they know their campaign has been engineered in every way, from the voters they target to the viral memes they create to defeat Biden. And privately,
memes. Well,
they're all
this
but
one
praying
is
that he remains their opponent. So it's interesting. I mean, I see them. They're already attacking Kamala Harris, the vice president, and the rest. But the way Alberta describes it, they're not really ready to switch and go after anyone other than Biden, at least not on a dime.
Which I don't think is necessarily isolated to the Trump campaign in this specific scenario. Think about any campaign you've covered over every single cycle and what they would have to be dealing with if they thought midstream, 4 months before an election, they were about to get a new opponent. It would be a dramatic, unprecedented shift for an opposing campaign to actually deal with. Now, as you noted, the attacks on the vice president have significantly ramped up over the course of the last several days from Trump's advisors, from surrogates around him, and they believe on a messaging front, they will be able to attack similar messages. They can tie her not just to the Biden policies that they feel like they can run against, but also her knowledge about anything that was going on behind the scenes that people hadn't seen until the debate beforehand. But there is a reality. They are running against an opponent who is historically lacking in approval inside the country, who has had a really terrible last 14, 15 days, and who they have crafted messages, tailoring, and targeting to defeat. And to have that swapped out at the last minute would certainly be a shift that they weren't expecting.
So looking ahead to the convention, a Republican convention in Milwaukee starts on Monday. How is the schedule for the convention actually keeping up with events? Have they been rewriting the program to keep up with Biden's struggles?
You know, it's interesting, and you're a veteran of this process, and you know any candidate going into a convention, they want to keep a lot of stuff under wraps. They want a lot of surprises. They want to go for the drama and the surprise. No one more so than the former president of the United States. There will certainly be shifts and references, I think, in talking to people that are going to speak that we know up to this point. But I think what they want to focus on more than anything else, and whether or not their speakers will actually fall into line on this front, I think is an open question. But they believe there's a contrast argument of, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It sounds simple. It sounds kind of very normal politics that maybe you don't necessarily always attach to Trump and his team, but they know that that's the most effective thing, at least in prime time when they know millions of people are watching. Whether or not that will be delivered, given people like Marjorie Taylor Greene will be speaking, very much an open question. But what I've been told is real people with real stories that can kind of highlight things that they feel like are wrong on the policy front will actually be a focus. Whether or not their headliners can match that focus or distract from it, I think is an open question.
4 years ago, not 5 years ago, because 4 years ago, I was broadcasting from my garage because we were in the middle of a once-in-a-century deadly pandemic.
Right, and I think the fact that I just somehow skipped over that underscores what has been a very real problem for the Biden campaign over the course of the last several years. Everybody seems to have blacked out that period of time, and before they could remind everybody, Joe Biden had a rather poor debate.
He did. I saw it.
I've heard,
Phil Mattingly, thanks so much. Since the start of the lead today, 2 more House Democrats, 2 additional ones, are now calling on Biden to step aside in the 2024 race publicly. That makes the count on Capitol Hill 14 in total. I think when we started the day, it was 10, maybe. There is a large swath of the Democratic Party who do want Biden to stay the course, stay on the ticket. What a CNN correspondent who's been traveling across the country has been hearing from voters.
Democrats.
That's next.
You might know a couple. Top-level Democrats, they're not. They're
I voted buttons.
I'm voting for dragons. Mine are rainbow kittens.
It's like your generation has evolved past traditional political symbols, and there's room for...
They think that Biden should be pushed or cast aside. Most consequentially, though, they tell me no matter if it is Biden or Harris come November, they will support either of them because they are most concerned about former President Donald Trump not getting reelected. Here's a little bit of what we heard today here in Greensboro.
I support what the president, whatever decision he chooses to make. I support the ticket.
Tell me, what do you make of these calls for President Biden to step aside and for the vice president to lead the ticket?
I believe it'll be a good thing to do. I think that Kamala Harris is more than ready for that work, and I believe in the power that she has to take this country, to this nation, to a level where it can be powerful in a way for minority people, structurally, systemically, and institutionally.
So, Jake, that young woman there, she's an entrepreneur, and ultimately she said she would be more excited to vote for Harris come November, but if Biden stays on until the fall, she'll support him as well. And she cites this administration's policy on gun violence. So what you're hearing from these black voters is that they are really pragmatic. They see voting for a Democrat in the fall as a choice about policy more so than supporting President Biden in particular. Jake.
All right, Eva McCann, thank you so much. Let's bring in Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. He's a Democrat from the great state of Missouri, and he's a former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. We're moments away from President Biden's press conference, rather high stakes. What are you going to be looking for?
I like to say a man of some patience. I just cannot tolerate, as many of you probably are the same, I just cannot tolerate listening to these psychopaths for very long. It's like, just look at this. I've got it paused. Look at this guy. Look at Jake Tapper. We need to find the clip. The clip that I'm referencing, it's been 3 days ago, where Jake Tapper, they're doing the best that they can to expose Biden because they know that they have no chance of beating Donald Trump. But they're in a quandary. They're in a horribly perplexing situation, considering the fact that if you don't, like Trump said the other day, he said, Joe Biden, the one good thing he did was get the best insurance policy known to man, and that is Kamala Harris being his VP. They can't push him out because she's worse than he is. So they end up in this horrible situation where they have the most disliked vice president ever. Even, I would say she is more disliked than Dick Cheney is now, because obviously vice president under George Bush. People don't like him. His daughter, Liz Cheney, does. Most people who know anything don't like Dick Cheney. Well, she is less liked than he is. And they don't want her to be in power either. So what they're having to deal with is, how do we replace Joe Biden and skirt around the fact that we have a black vice president? Is she black? Is she Native American? I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen her DNA test. I know she's probably like Elizabeth Warren. Well, she is. She's a race hustler. She's a woman who has a track record of doing horribly pervasive and racist things. Anyone who knows anything about Kamala Harris knows that she does not do things that benefit anyone other than herself, sometimes at the detriment of her own needs. I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. When we look at her and how unfavorable she is, the Democrat social justice warrior pandering class, the elites they know she's not popular. They don't want her. They know she'll do what they want, but she can't win an election. I made a post the other day that I'll reflect on with you all, because I think people need to know the true depth of her depravity. She doesn't have a moral compass. That's long gone. What she has is a deep desire to attain more and more power. And when you combine that with the fact that she fits the exact stereotype of what the Democrats have tried to push. And that's why she got elected. Well, that's why she got the vice presidency. Joe Biden himself said she's a DEI hire. We say that we're horribly racist. Now, I'll show you what I'm referencing. So, you want to know why she's unpopular. It's not because we're bigoted in any way, because we know her track record. For example, yes, this is my post, so I'm not trying to self-shout out. Sorry. But I think it's easy to look through something and keep your train of thought as you read something that pretty effectively exposes her track record. And I've read the documents. I've read through her history. Now, if you go on Google and you try to find her track record as DA and Attorney General of California, it's a very difficult thing to find, because the news propped her up as a benevolent law enforcement official, when that is the exact opposite of what she actually truly was. So, one, for starters, she's as feeble-minded as Joe. And she, as a younger woman, substantially younger woman, has
well,
made
I think the president
more.
is obviously going to have
She's
to
said
demonstrate
things
rather
far
clearly
worse
and cleanly
than an intellectual
that he
wizard,
is able
like Joe
to
said,
prosecute the case
of the Secretary of
against
NATO.
Donald Trump.
People minded as Joe.
Look,
What has
this
been
thing
is
is about
always has
winning,
been,
and
always
we
will
believe
be,
that it
and
is
we've never experienced things
one of the
we've
most
never experienced
dangerous moments in the history of the United States, maybe since the Civil War.
changing her tone and approach
And
with
so
each crowd. That,
the
for a
president's
fact,
got to come in and let people know I'm ready
She's in front of a
to
black
do
crowd
this, and he's got
in the South.
to be
She tries
clear.
to
And
adopt
I'm pulling
this.
for him because I love Joe Biden. He has been perhaps the most
She tries to adopt this
significant
disingenuous
president in terms of
Southern
accomplishments during my lifetime.
accent.
And maybe the LBJ would be close,
almost
and
She's
FDR for my
blasphemer in
parents.
chief.
But this man has to win if he's going to go ahead in this campaign.
Are you convinced that he's the best candidate to beat Donald Trump? I mean, I've seen polling, and there was a CNN poll a week ago, the Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll today. Both of these polls that I'm referring to show.
If you look at her legislative agenda and the things that they're pushing, the left, the radical left, and the Democrat Party at this point has no choice other than to push radical left ideology. Why is that, you may ask? Well, because they got elected on pushing the Green New Deal and Marxist political plans. What about her legislative agenda? What about the things she's said she was going to do and panders about follows any type of Christian principle? None. Gender affirming care for children? I think not. Gender affirming care for children, pro-abortion. We're no longer in the realm of pro-choice. My body, my choice was effectively eradicated during COVID, considering the fact that my body I didn't have a choice over my body. I'm a business owner, but if I weren't a business owner, I would have been forced to take a COVID gene therapy. Let's make sure we get our vernacular there correct. Well, pro-abortion, gender ideology, pro-gender transitioning for kids, pro-abduction of children, and the list goes on and on. When you change Easter, you don't change Easter, you just transplant another woke holiday into, when they already have 6 months out of the year celebrating them, you put in, what was it, Transgender Day of Visibility on Easter. Their intention is clear: to destroy Christianity at all cost. And funny enough, Candace Owens published a video today or yesterday, I'm not sure, about how the United States and world leadership has been at war with the Christian religion for a long time. Notice how when we bombed Nagasaki, is the Catholic capital of Japan. So it's not hard to see, and we take the Bible, we take the Pledge of Allegiance, it's anti-American, it's anti-Christian. If you're a Christian, you see it, plain as day. So, she's a liar. We know that. Who locked up innocent black men en masse in her time as DA, preventing exonerating evidence from being released, effectively using slave labor in California. And that is unbelievably true. If you didn't know that Kamala Harris, laughing Kamala, locked men up way above their population in percentages that are staggering for nonviolent crimes. Just like Joe Biden authored the 1994 crime bill, Kamala Harris locked black men up, kept them there, slave labor for the state, and evidence that proved their innocence. You know, it's folks like the Innocence Project, where folks are locked up and they're innocent, put on death row for crimes they did not commit. The person who started it, and gosh, I can't remember his name, he actually referenced Kamala Harris because evidence that would exonerate the person in question, the evidence that would have been presented in court, was kept from being used as evidence. The list goes on, and you can look at her track record. I mean, you're a DA, so what is, as a prosecutor, the lead prosecutor, what is your job? Your job is to have a high conviction rate. That's how you get, it's politics. It's a political law enforcement official. So she lied vociferously about her heritage, all to get a leg up politically. Notice, Trump is the only American president in history whose ancestors did not have slaves. Well, that's quite odd, considering Kamala Harris's grandfather had slaves, a major slave owner. And she said she was Native American Indian. She says she's black. And she said a lot of things. She says whatever she has to say to gain more power. If it was politically expedient for her to say she's white, she would be saying she's white today, right now. She, without question, got to where she is because she slept her way there. Did you guys know that she dated Montel Williams? That was her in public life, not in political public life. In public life, her coming to fame, the light was shone on her first when she was dating Montel Williams. Interesting. But you look at the stories, and we'll go on a tangent for hours about Kamala Harris. Bought and paid for. Look at who her donors are. Look at the lobbyists. Look at how she got to where she is today. And this is true of all politicians, practically. Matt Gaetz went on Timcast, 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about how he went to his constituents in his state, in his district, and he said, look, I'm not going to be able to make a difference at all if I don't get on a committee. And I'm not taking any money. I'm not taking any money from lobbyists or PACs. I'm going to get on these lobbies, but I need your money. I need you to double your donation. I need you to help me get on these committees. And he did. And now watch. He's a firestorm. He's a barnstormer, so to speak, where change is made effectively through him standing up for the things Americans care about. America first, not Israel first, not Ukraine first, not anywhere first. It's America first. We care for our own citizens. We pay taxes. We should have our citizens cared for. No. Instead, we flood our country with illegal drugs, but they're not even illegal anymore, really. They're not even decriminalized, but people are still able to get drunk or get high on fentanyl, passed out in the street for days, defecating all over themselves or in the street. And you and I, paying our taxes, God forbid, if you live in a blue state, you pay your taxes. You pay your federal income tax, you pay your state income tax, and guess what? You have no say in it other than opening your phone up and clicking a specific location so that you can mark that somebody pooped there. Scat map. That's where your tax dollars are going. Far left, and quite frankly, just outright stupid. So, yeah, it's all applicable, all completely true, and if that woman became our president, we would know she became our president thanks to our government, and namely Joe Biden. Because if the SAVE Act is put in front of Joe Biden, there's no chance. He will veto it. So we know the plan. We know how many constituents, how many delegates and electoral votes come from states with no voter ID or no photo voter ID. She's the epitome of establishing an elite who prostitute themselves to the highest bidder and see no borders between countries, only opportunities to increase their power and wealth. Again, not trying to shout myself out, but a stream of consciousness is good. And the ability to read through a list of things such as this does have some power to it. We can go on for days. But what we're here for today is to enjoy the debauchery in the White House. So I think we should observe what Joe Biden has done over his 4 years, because with how effectively and how much the Democrat Party has cannibalized Joe Biden in unison with one another. It was the debate. We all knew it. The debate happens. He's got dementia. Now he's got Parkinson's. Well, we would have known that years ago had the White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor, who was Joe Biden's personal doctor prior to. So Ronnie Jackson is Donald Trump's personal doctor. But that's a massive problem. And there's all this corruption when Donald Trump does it. Wait a second. Joe Biden's doctor is his personal doctor. And he's involved in the Biden crime family's business dealings. How is that not corrupt? So that's why, if you noticed the other day, Karine Jean-Pierre said Joe Biden always has a neurologist check him out during his physicals. Well, if we trace time back, Joe Biden did not have a physical until February. That was his most recent. That was the most recent time Kevin O'Connor checked out Joe Biden for his physical. But his neurological exam was in January. Oh, so I guess it's a 6-week physical, just pure observation. I don't know how that math makes sense. It seems like that's the neurologist, the Parkinson's expert, went a month and a half prior, and then he had his physical, in which Dr. Kevin O'Connor fudged the numbers, lied, said he's perfectly capable, and there is absolutely no reason to do a cognitive test. He's as sharp as a tack, word for word what he said. So we see the White House deflecting. We see the White House completely at war with the DNC. I'm here for it. I'm enjoying it. I pray that Joe Biden stays in the race. I think we all do. Because, quite simply, he is the easiest target, the easiest one to beat. And if Donald Trump didn't say one more word, didn't have one more rally that say he's sick or dying somewhere, but if he didn't have one more rally, he didn't make one more Truth Social post, and he didn't do the other debate, he would win this election by, well, honestly, he may gain more voters because he wasn't talking. I mean, we like it, but it doesn't bring more voters or more people to our side because we like the energy. They think he's the next Hitler. So today, in watching this press conference here shortly, and if you would not mind, please share the stream. If you're on YouTube, share the stream. I actually need to post that link. What we are going to see, since the White House has cannibalized Joe Biden, turned on him, or not the White House, the DNC, with Barack Obama effectively going to Hollywood and saying, he's got to go, Joe's got to go. We should assume that there's going to be some pretty hard-hitting questions. The reason I'm live streaming this, and if you're here again and you haven't watched the stream before, life got busy. We used to stream every day. Period of time where throttling was a real thing. I just said, screw it. I want to watch this with you guys, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter about the numbers. It matters about the camaraderie and enjoying something that is going to be a moment in history we will all remember. We will all remember the big boy press conference. I will. I think it's impossible to not look back on this moment with joy and glee because, gosh, it's hard. It's really hard, and it's sad to cheer for the downfall of somebody. But when your president is an asset of this Chinese Communist Party, it's hard to say anything good about the guy. Okay, so I know I keep saying we're going to look at the track record. What has Joe Biden done over these 3.5 years? Well, I think it's crazy to say, because 2 years ago, people on the right were saying 10 million people have come across the border, 12 million people have come across the border, and they're still saying 10 million people. Some say 12 million people. How has the number not increased? My assumption is that it's 17 million. 6 months ago, it was 17 million people. So how we keep deflecting and going from high number to way lower, let's just say 15 to 20 million people have come into this country, many of which are military-aged males who are part of a foreign government. They have ties to a foreign government. The purpose is clear. When they have flyers posted all over the place in these third world countries saying, come to America, all expenses paid, your free ride is here. Then you get here, and this is, again, we're talking about Joe Biden's track record. I go off on a tangent. I get so pissed off thinking about the state of our country. They come here, our taxes have to be paid, otherwise one of the 87,000 armed IRS agents show up to your house. They come here, they don't pay taxes, they get to vote and alter the course of history for our country. They get money on a debit card. They complain about the 5-star hotel that they're living in for free, with free food, complain about the quality of the food. They poop and piss in the street. They commit crime at rates far above the native-born population. Don't listen to what the leftists say. They obviously commit crimes at a way higher rate, way more of a... Their initial act of entering this country is illegal. Think of how stupid that is. They commit crime at a lower rate than Americans, when the first thing they do is a criminal act. Have you committed a crime? You sped. Sure, most people speed. How? Have you committed a federal crime? Maybe you have. But that doesn't mean you have to kill someone. You've committed a crime when you enter the country. So they have the red carpet rolled out for them, probably a private militia for the deep state, the government, to utilize in time of need. And surely they can see the writing on the wall. Hey, yeah, Eddie, you're right. Workforce and wage work replacement. Let's talk about that. What happens when you have a massive swath of people come into a country allowed to be here that don't pay taxes? Well, you have wage suppression. This is something that I've studied in depth. Wage suppression and lost jobs, because there are jobs that Americans don't want to do. We're inherently, a lot of us are lazy anyway. And you can see in my generation, and especially the generation below us, we don't want to work. But then when you have labor that will come here and work off the record, their income's not taxed, they can work for far lower. And the conversation gets a lot deeper when we talk about wages here for Americans. And by law, you have to pay the minimum wage. But when someone comes through and you don't have to pay them the minimum wage, you can pay them $5 an hour. Their marginal labor per hour, per unit, is far higher than $5 an hour, but they have to work. They want to work. They get to work. Paid under the table. The employer benefits tremendously. So moving on from the immigration and the private militia that the Democrat Party, the uniparty. I hate the Democrat Party term. I think that we need to move towards the anti-human party and the pro-human party. Pro-liberty, pro-freedom, pro-tyranny, pro-authoritarianism. So if those were our two political parties, then by all means, we can call them their respective names. But Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal, these are monikers with no meaning. It's like tribal warfare, where if you say you're liberal, I dislike you. But we may agree on most things, but because of that title, I dislike you. That's abhorrent to the American political process. It is the identity of the American political process as currently constructed. Past immigration, we have Ukraine. This is a huge problem. Poor citizens will be more likely to join up. Yeah, you're right, Eddie. What do we have with respect to Ukraine? Well, before Donald Trump was impeached a second time, another phony fraud story built on a mountain of lies was that Joe Biden was, well, playing quid pro Joe. I'm getting tongue-tied just thinking about this press conference. Quid pro Joe, involved in countless foreign business dealings, was involved in a influence peddling scheme, as always, money laundering scheme in addition, where Hunter Biden, you all know this, was on the board of directors for a Ukrainian natural gas company, an energy company, Burisma, in Ukraine. When he was influence peddling to Ukraine and China in tandem, both at the same time, making millions, Joe Biden, there was a Ukrainian prosecutor, was it Victor Shokin, tasked with investigating the corruption of the Biden crime family and American political interest, corruption, and influence, the American influence over Ukraine. Well, that was a huge mistake. Joe Biden, and he said this on video at a conference, you won't get these billions of dollars if you don't fire him. Well, damn it, they fired the bastard. Okay, so that was clear. Donald Trump tries to call he makes a call to Ukrainian president. Hey, what's going on here? Impeached. That was an official act. That was a phone call to a world leader. So we know that there's a massive amount of corruption in Ukraine. We know that in 2014, the United States, the CIA, utilized the Azov Battalion, a group of neo-Nazis that overthrew the democratically elected Ukrainian government. Then we install a man who was literally an actor and comedian who played the role in a TV show where he was a world leader in the TV show. This stuff is impossible to make up. If I told you this, it's so strange, it's stranger than fiction. The world we live in. So we have the Ukraine war. Why? Well, it's not because Vladimir Putin, who has... I'm fine with getting canceled over Vladimir Putin. I wage that the United States of America is the world's terrorist. And if you want to debate me on it, by all means, that's fine. We were told, and NATO is a pile of trash anyway. Wait, gotta sneeze. NATO is a pile of trash anyway that we have held up for decades, where we have continued to funnel money out of our pockets and our coffers into this NATO defense budget where other countries aren't. Donald Trump said, we'll get out of NATO. But we sure as hell aren't going to put NATO on the border of Russia with military equipment to continue seizing Russian land. Lindsey Graham said it the other day, quiet part out loud, that Ukraine, the Donbass, and Russia have trillions of dollars of natural gas, of minerals, underneath the ground. Well, what is American colonialism? And I'm not a liberal. I'm just telling you the truth. We go and we terrorize the entire world for their resources. Look at the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, Afghanistan, the war on terror. What have we done? We've seized land. We've destabilized an area. We've set up tripwires with our bases all over the place so that when they get hit by a stray rocket from Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis, well, what do we have? We have a war. Oh, gosh almighty, we've got to protect these people because they're being suppressed. They need democracy. No, they don't need democracy. Democracy is just a convenient way to say we're going to bomb the hell out of them and steal their reserves or their oil and their resources. What Ukraine is a money laundering operation for the deep state. I don't love that term because it's associated with conspiracy. There is a deep state. You're crazy and stupid to think that there isn't. People who love power, people who are psychopaths, people who love money, they're inherently going to act in their own self-interest, not of those around them. And if that means they have to subvert the American way of life to do it, then they will. Because guess what? Oh, I'm getting cold chills thinking about controlling your life. They did it with COVID. Crimea River. Well, when you launder money through Ukraine because you push our troops, our military equipment, our jets, and into a country and do exactly what Vladimir Putin said not to do by moving NATO and bringing NATO or Ukraine into NATO, you're going to have a war. Okay. So throughout Joe Biden's presidency, I hope and pray they ask him about this stuff. Do I want it to be a softball press conference? Sure, because I want him to stay in the race. I'm fine with listening to Jake Tapper and George Stephanopoulos and all the rest, especially Joe Scarborough, say that he's cogent. And that's how he says it. Joe Biden is cogent, and F you if you don't believe me. Do we want it to be a softball or do we want it to be hard? I want it to be a softball because I want him to stay in, but I do want to see him slip, bumble, and poop himself. Sorry. So during his presidency, we can talk about the illegals, we can talk about Ukraine, we can talk about the current border policy, not border policy, the economic policy. We can talk about foreign policy outside of Ukraine and outside of Israel. Fact of the matter is, this is the worst president in American history. Not only because his brain doesn't work, not only because he's corrupt, but just simply because he has no purpose in his position in the White House other than to destroy this country. When you're as corrupt as he is, there are the axis of power has control over you and your decision making. Does Joe Biden make the decisions even if his brain were perfectly functional? No. You don't make $100 million off foreign business deals if you have complete autonomy over who you are and how you act as the commander-in-chief of a country or any politician in general. I will say before we continue on the corruption, and we'll go back to CNN here in just a minute. We're a short 20 minutes away. Thomas Massey wasn't there today to vote and yesterday, but we ought to pray for Thomas Massey, and it's so sad. I was looking at pictures this morning of him and his family and his wife. It's so heartbreaking to think. Thomas Massey is a real patriot, and he puts people's feet to the fire. Do I agree with everything he says? No, that's okay, though. We don't want to agree with everything someone says, because that just means you're following them. They're probably informing you of their ideas, and you just follow along. Thomas Massey's wife died unexpectedly. He posted recently about it was no conspiracy, just autopsy results aren't back yet. We don't know if it wasn't a conspiracy, I guess, but pray for Thomas Massey, pray for his family. What matters most is that as Americans, but most importantly as Christians, for those of you out there, we should testify to those around us. Evil is everywhere. Evil is everywhere. Epstein, the flight logs nowhere to be found. The clients are nowhere to be found. Surely we would find a lot of them in California. I said evil is everywhere. They went ballistic when there was a bill introduced that would criminalize, get this is crazy. This is so authoritarian. Criminalize paying for sex with minors. I know. Sick. Can't believe it. So pray for Thomas Massey. Pray for our country. Pray for each other. So on back to Joe Biden's track record as president. If put in the chat, what has he done that was good? Oh, I can tell you what he did that was good. Pray for the Steelers, Tony Corley says. Netanyahu has the Epstein tapes and is using them right now. Yeah? Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point, Eddie. Yeah? And we have to get to the war in Israel, too. That's the most contentious topic in American politics currently. We're just dealing with, I'll be posting a clip later. Again, I'm going to get back to the evil. We need to talk about Israel. We need to talk about COVID. And those two topics will probably run us right up to where we need to get into the press conference, the CNN coverage, because we got to see Jake Tapper. When, I don't know if you guys watched Jimmy Dore's show, and when he posts the clip of he posts the interview that he had last night, the most mind-boggling information that I've ever heard. There's a man by the name, let's get it, Dr. Well, I've forgotten his name. Dr. Brian something. Anyway, he's led, let's see if I can find him. He has led the action against Dr. Fauci and getting the indemnity, getting the immunity from prosecution removed from pharmaceutical companies and manufacturers. So what has happened effectively, and when Jimmy Dore had him on his show, I'm going to try to get his name pulled up here so that way you guys can go follow him. When I post this interview, it will break every paradigm you've ever held regarding COVID. We all know it was a plan. We all know that the safe and effective vaccines, yes, they were safe and effective. YouTube. Streaming on YouTube as well. This is going to be a tough one to dance around. Maybe I just say screw it and get banned. So if we dance around the issue, you remember the EcoHealth Alliance. What the EcoHealth Alliance was tasked with, and what they've testified in front of Congress with Peter Daszak, is that Anthony Fauci and Peter Daszak worked in tandem to effectively cover up their malfeasance with the COVID pandemic and the regulations. I can't check my phone, Tony. It's unavailable at the moment. We're streaming. That was a cover story. The EcoHealth Alliance and the money sent to them and the moratorium on testing, or the moratorium on gain-of-function research. Well, we know that the deep state loves a good cover-up, a good cover story, and typically it takes, 77 years for the cover story to be revealed. We still don't have the JFK documents. UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm waiting on the stream to get taken down, to be honest. UNC Chapel Hill, if you're familiar, and it's only 3 hours away from me, there's a man by the name of Ralph Barrick. Ralph Barrick was the head of the epidemiology. Let's see. I'm going to try my best to get this up here. He's the head of the epidemiology department at the UNC Chapel Hill. Now, get this. 1999, Dr. Fauci, I would say, fell in love, gained a great admiration for Ralph Barrick because he had figured out a way to get a spike protein to penetrate the heart muscle. And these two became great friends. During the moratorium on gain of function, Wuhan was also a smokescreen. You always have to have an effective smokescreen. If you're going to do something nefarious, you need to have a smokescreen so that we look over here while we do this over here. So the smokescreen was Wuhan, WHO, NIAID, and EcoHealth Alliance. So, getting back to UNC Chapel Hill, it's 2014. The patent was filed to effectively, SARS-CoV-2 was created in this lab in UNC Chapel Hill, not Wuhan. And it was created well before, and it was not a novel coronavirus because it had already been around for years. And lastly, it was a defective. SARS-CoV-2 was a defective virus. It did not self-replicate. How are we getting, and transmission wasn't as effective. In fact, the defective virus does not transmit. It has to be administered. So do you remember that period of time where all of those COVID tests that were given to the public, do you remember where all those tests were contaminated with COVID? It's quite convenient, isn't it? Quite convenient indeed. So moving back to Joe Biden, he is the topic of the day. I'll find the guy's name once we start the press conference. Locked us down. Oh, and I need to say that the COVID pandemic was, gosh, how do I dance around this? The COVID pandemic, we all know that it was not this novel coronavirus came out of a bat, out of a wet market. There were things put in place way before 2019 and 2020, way before. In 2018, Peter Daszak himself said, and Dr. Fauci said, we need a respiratory virus that's highly transmissible. We need fear-mongering and scare porn so that we can get universal vaccine mandates and universal vaccinations. So all part of the plan. DARPA, I'm about to blow your guys' mind. DARPA was involved from the very beginning in creating this coronavirus, known to not be all that DARPA involved. 2010, so there was I would say a charter. There was something created that was supposed to last from 2000 to 2010. Guess what it was called? The Darwinian Chemical Sciences. Let's get this pulled up. And I'll pull it back up on the screen. Darwinian. God, you guys are not going to believe this. So guess what? Guess what Moderna was? Guys, if this doesn't change how you look at the vaccine, the safe and effective vaccine, guess what the name of Moderna was before it was Moderna? The Darwinian Chemical Systems. Yeah. So it became Moderna later, at a later point in time. And the list goes on. I need to stop going on these tangents because we're running out of time. Joe Biden locked us in our houses, mandated that we get a safe and effective vaccine, and forced non-scientific principles on a public who was already distrusting it, but then so many people followed along for fear of condemnation and losing their job, losing their livelihoods, losing their families, losing their house. Masks, and this shouldn't get me struck down, masks were never effective. N95s, sure, but you still have air coming out, and it's horrible for your respiratory system. COVID, or Dr. Fauci knew the entire time that COVID was not going to be prevented from spreading, or whatever we were dealing with, from masks. He said it himself. He backtracked. We need to mask. I even double mask sometimes. And then he said masks don't work. Back and forth. 6 feet social distancing, just like he testified before Congress recently, or the House Oversight Committee, and House COVID, whatever, said that we kind of just made up all the COVID mandates and the requirements. They just kind of happened. And all this, we got to figure out a way to get people to drop their ideological bullshit as I test sand fleas, whatever, on beagles. So draconian lockdown measures, mandates, the complete demonization of ivermectin and effective treatments for COVID. And then we have another war, Israel-Gaza, the Israel-Hamas war, where you can think me a maniac for saying this. You can think I am anti-Semitic. I'm not. I'm just a realist, and I watch what's happening. And I think the same thing of America. You cannot follow blindly a country that does things that shake your conscience. They break your conscience. And when you watch videos from Gaza, it's mortifying. And these are children. 50% of the people that are getting killed are children. Now, is there a good solution? I don't know. Is there a good solution to something so difficult to assess, difficult to address? Hamas lingers in the darkness, but then you see the fact that the Hannibal Directive was given to Israel before the October 7th attack, where the IDF was given permission, or given the order rather, to shoot and kill Israelis if they were potentially going to get captured. So why are journalists not allowed there? Why are journalists not allowed in Gaza? All these questions, they run through my mind all the time, because I might be across the world, but I mourn the loss of innocent lives when millions of them are being taken. And we could say on both sides, sure, but Joe Biden is doing nothing to help prevent this from happening. In fact, he's making it more likely that it will happen on a global scale with NATO confirming that we were going to send F-16s that are probably 50 years old, but nonetheless, send F-16s to Ukraine. And this comes a week, 2 weeks after, comes a week after we were told our tax dollars to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars are getting sent to Ukraine again. It is dark times, folks. We've been going an hour. I could go another 5 hours on just the sheer despotism, the demonic actions that our government is taking. But I'll shut up. And I appreciate you guys being here with me. I do. I get on these tangents when I think about the current state of our country, the current state of MK Ultra. Frankly, that's what it is. Project Mockingbird and MK Ultra. Why are people so insane? Why are people completely oblivious to the evidence right before them? It was their the party that told you to not believe the evidence of your eyes and your ears. It was their final and most important command. We're paraphrasing here. I don't know why I can never remember that word for word. Anyway, 1984. So we're going to get back to CNN and Jake Tapper, the esteemed, the wonderful Jake Tapper. We are just a mere couple of minutes away from the big boy press conference that we're all anxiously waiting to see.
Helped us obtain the necessary air defense systems, thanks
is who we have to be looking at right
America
now, back to it.
and to all the partners, to all the leaders and your societies, your people, of course. And thanks to all partners for the Patriots and other air defense systems, provision of F-16s and assistance so that our people and our country could withstand Russian attacks on our energy sector, as well as training, cybersecurity, intelligence cooperation, and the development of the defense industry.
All right, that's Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky speaking at the NATO summit. President Biden's next public event will be the closely watched news conference. That's just moments away. Let's bring the panel along, back along with CNN's Caitlin Collins. And Caitlin, we have to acknowledge that at this high-stakes moment, President Biden, first of all, introduced President Zelensky as President Putin, A, but then B, did catch himself and quickly recover, but still not a wonderful time to make a gaffe like that.
Yeah, it took him 2 seconds to correct it, and obviously President Zelensky also made a joke about it, but I mean, people can see the sensitivity of that. But this is what I've been hearing from the president's allies and advisors all day long, which is that this press conference coming up is going to be just as scrutinized as that moment was just there, where essentially every single thing he says is going to be under so much more scrutiny than any press conference, any statement he's ever given before. It reminds me of when he came back to the White House late after the Robert Hur special counsel's report came out, where it described Biden as this old man with an ailing memory and was talking about what that was like. Biden came out to defend himself against that and ended up mixing up the names of 2 other world leaders. And that was kind of a headline coming out of that because it spoke to that moment. And so this is what they are bracing for, and what this press conference and the unknowns of what this is going to look like is for anyone to mix up names. I mean, obviously, we've seen former President Donald Trump do the exact same thing on multiple occasions. I was personally witnessing it when he was inside the White House. They know that is going to be a dynamic of this press conference tonight.
Yeah, and Gloria, the White House says they're done. They're done talking
Yeah.
about calls on President Biden
They're
to
not
drop
done.
out.
Yeah.
But the calls keep coming. There have been several House Democrats that have come forward today. We booked Congresswoman Skolton earlier. When we booked her, she was the latest. By the time she showed up here, she was not the latest. Congressman Schneider had, and she was barely off the set when another House Democrat called on President Biden to step down. Where do we go from here?
Well, there's nothing they can do, first of all, to stop that, particularly since I think Nancy Pelosi gave everyone a permission slip to continue to talk about it. Biden said he's done, and Nancy Pelosi said give him more time, even though Biden said, I'm running. And so she gave everyone that permission slip, and they're using it. And I think that obviously everything tonight is going to be scrutinized, but the Democrats that I've been talking to who are skeptical are saying, what do we expect? Do we expect a different Joe Biden tonight than we've seen recently? I mean, he's not aging backwards like Benjamin Button. He is who he is.
Right.
And
that would be something.
That would be something. But to see, but so what do we expect this evening?
I wonder if that is part of why we are seeing these stories this afternoon of the rats off the sinking ship. You pick your metaphor, right? Because there is so much pressure on President Biden. There's no way he's going.
No. Well, folks, we have a dilemma here. What? Oh man, our stream just crashed. Or the live coverage of CNN just crashed. So we'll get this resolved. Huh. Apologize, folks. We'll get this back up in just a second.
Restaurant store.
30 chairs, non-squeak.
Restaurant store.
15 non-wobbly tables.
Restaurant store.
Add 8.
There we go.
A lot of politicians, national politicians, come into California.
I want to see CNN.
Which is
upcoming. No shot. But they don't put this live. All right. We'll get the clips afterwards, I guess. See, CNN is still so tied to their old school, mainstream way of thinking about how they are going to make money.
And with the Democratic base of support, have they done enough to alleviate these concerns in these 2 weeks? Why is the first press conference where Biden will be put to reporters happening 2 weeks later?
because the pressure is on. Maximum pressure is being put on the president to perform well, to answer questions that are unscripted. But one notes that if the reports are correct, that he didn't get back to some leaders in the Democrat Party after the debate for several days. Not good news. And so he has a lot of people to convince that he's ready to continue campaigning as we move towards November.
So, Brian, also I wanted to bring up as well these conversations that are happening on Capitol Hill. We know that this meeting was held today with Senate Democrats and also senior Biden campaign and senior Biden White House officials. Were getting some readouts of how that meeting went. Andrew Desiderio there at Punchbowl News, he said this in his reporting from inside the room. Senate Democrats got heated with Biden advisors. According to 2 Democratic senators who were present, a number of Dems told the Biden team that they're, quote, being put in an untenable position defending something that so many of their constituents felt was obvious. The message to Biden advisors, according to one of these senators, was, quote, where has he been? The only way this is going to go away is if he deals with it, and he hasn't dealt with it, and you guys have been avoiding it.
Oh, so, Eddie, I think he has 4 yachts.
To that point, Brian, you were just alluding to,
I just not saw your chat.
Why hasn't Biden gone to Capitol Hill and met with House Democrats and senior Democrats there in the Senate as well? I mean, why is it?
So here's a good question for you guys.
Jen O'Malley Dillon and Ron Klain and Steve Ricchetti.
Eddie says, here comes Joe's bus. Will he jump or be pushed?
Oh, absolutely. And he has been guarded closely by his inner circle. And the only explanation for that is that they believe if he goes to Capitol Hill and is asked questions and has to invariably speak with the media in the hallways there and around the offices, that he won't do well. And because that has to be the only explanation. You would never hold a candidate back, or a city president for this matter, back from talking with constituents, talking with people on the Hill, unless you feel like it's dangerous to do so. That
so we'll have to see if he can.
A reporter is going to ask a question that he totally fumbles, or a member of Congress is going to ask him a question that he really messes up, and that leaks out. It's out in a minute, and furthers this narrative that he is cognitively challenged in a big way right now.
Yeah. He is.
I'm going to step in for a second here. We do have to take a quick commercial break. Brian, if you can still stick with us. Andrew Kraft, you're going to be joining us. Right now, we have reports that this press conference may be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so about half an hour away. So we're going to step away for that quick commercial break, but stick with us here at Live Now from Fox. A tweet here from Shannon Bream saying, as we await the biggest press conference of his presidency, and all eyes, ears are parsing his every word. We'll see you back here right after this.
So we're going to be waiting until 7 now. Surprise, surprise. He's trying to pull a card out of Trump's playbook. We'll go let's see what we got. We've got plenty of clips of Joe Biden We got to watch some of these just to refresh our memory of how bad how bad a shape Joe Biden's in. So now we're going to be waiting until 7. So we've got some more time. Share the stream, please. Share it, like it, repost, whatever. Do whatever you got to do. Let's get more people in here. Let's enjoy watching Joe Biden do what he does best, embarrassing himself and his family and the Democrat Party. Here is the most recent, soon-to-be viral clip. Joe Biden calling the president of Ukraine Vladimir Putin.
Hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's a big President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin.
How bad can
He's a big President Putin. President Zelensky.
How bad
I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage.
How bad can it get? So we're supposed to hate Putin so much. But evidently the president of Ukraine. Here's another good one. Here's Dr. Joe Biden.
As you look back and reflect on 2023, what sort of memories, highlights stand out for you?
Well, one of the big highlights stands out for me is my dad used to have an expression. He'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than the paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. So many people through the Midwest and the center of the country, their factories are shipped overseas the last couple of times out, and they were losing hope and faith. So we brought a lot of jobs back to the United States. People are in a position to be able to make a living now, and they've created a lot of jobs, over 14 million. And I guess I just feel good that the American people got up. They've been through a rough time with pandemic, but now we're coming back. They're back.
As you look back and reflect on 2020,
and put us through those horrible draconian measures. And Joe Biden has effectively had brain surgery. He's had a stroke, aneurysm.
But I want to tell you, just be straight up. I got in trouble with some of the things I'll say, but I want to tell you, just be straight up. If I'm your president, with me, it starts here in my gut, goes to my heart, and then I articulate it. I don't trust people who, in fact, to stay with me if it starts here and doesn't ever work its way down to the heart. Amen. I got in trouble with some of the things I'll say, but I want to tell you, just be straight up.
I don't trust people who use their brain. I don't trust people who use their brain.
And now I want
Ukraine. We're going to get a lot of this.
These terrible headaches, was diagnosed with having anyway, they had to take the top of my head off a couple times, see if I had a brain.
See if I had a brain. He's never had a brain. Never once. Content cannot be played.
Chances exponential, genuine education. They don't increase their chances exponentially. Exponentially. Tell me, fine, what are we arguing about? Genuine education. They don't increase their chances exponentially.
I don't know if you guys went and watched the debate again. I watched it twice in the same night. I wanted to pick up on what I could. Quite frankly, there was little to pick up on. I wanted to see if there was anything of substance coming out of Joe's mouth. There wasn't. I wanted to watch Trump in his new strategy of letting him hang himself effectively, which he did a really good job of. And I wish we could run a poll here on X. I would be so curious to see how many people here right now are convinced that he will be replaced before the election. I don't, You know, one of the most curious things that I've heard is that they will have a mini primary, which Joe Biden went ballistic the other day. This was like 2 days after he said he was a black woman. Said that, oh yeah, let's have a primary. I'll kick their ass. Okay. You can't even wipe your own. How are you going to kick someone else's? So we're looking at another 20-minute wait. They give me some time to go get some coffee because I'm tired.
We do have a poll that we'd like you all to participate
So
in. You see it here on your screen right now. You just scan your QR code for you to vote, and here it just says, should President Biden leave the 2024 race? And that's really the question that's top of mind for so many voters, but also Congress members in D.C. and across the country. Let's continue on with some more of this pre-show coverage heading into that press conference. I'd like to bring back into the conversation now our very own Andrew Kraft and also political analyst Brian Sobel. Brian, let's start once again with you. This press conference supposed to get underway about 3 minutes ago if it was to be on time. What kind of final preparations is Joe Biden and his team doing ahead of this?
Well, one of the things that's going on is they're briefing him on what they think the questions will be. The problem with that is in overloading him with material, that can be very confusing. We have instances in history where just giving a candidate or an office holder too much information is actually very difficult. Ronald Reagan had a disastrous debate in one of his cycles because he was up at Camp David and all they did is throw facts and figures at him and he couldn't put it all together. It's very hard. So the less they say to...
Let's get some CBS injected into this.
But as you said, there's 7 rates, and 3 of them, 32%, 35%,
Notice
37%,
Chad is disabled
are
for
higher
this
than
train.
30%. So it's pretty clear that high-income people who are currently paying top rate higher than 30% would benefit significantly. They're also going to benefit substantially from those lower capital gains rates. Many of them are paying capital gains rates almost at 25%, and in this proposal, they'd be paying them as low as 15%. So big deal for high-income people. Impossible to know really what it means for lower-income people.
What about the U.S. economy? And I know that there are still questions to be answered here, but any idea right now of the impacts this could have?
Project 2025 was the boogeyman.
So one of the things we also don't know from this is whether this is a tax increase or a tax cut. Given the people who proposed it, it's fair to say it's probably a tax cut. We don't know how big that is, and we don't know who's going to benefit from it. So with all that said, it's hard to know. It's also important to recognize that another part of this proposal would raise tariffs again, and that is bad for the U.S. economy. We do know that.
Trump and his campaign have worked to distance themselves from Project 2025. It's unclear how they feel about this tax proposal, but has he publicly supported, what has he publicly supported, rather, when it comes to his own preferred tax policy?
So he started the campaign by saying he mostly favored cutting corporate tax rates. Then he shifted a little bit in the middle of the primaries and said, well, he really wants to continue the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was a 2017 tax bill that passed under his watch. That proposal, extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, is very different than this proposal. So it's hard to know how much of this he actually would support. Now, many of the people involved in developing this proposal were people who were helping him in his first administration. So it's possible that he would make some shifts. We don't know. As far as a longer-term proposal to create a consumption tax, I have no idea what he thinks about that. I don't think he's ever really talked about it.
Can I get a hand raise?
To be continued. Howard Gleckman, thank you.
Happy to see
lower taxes, please.
Testimony in Alec Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial continued for a second day Thursday in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The trial comes nearly 3 years after cinematographer Helena Hutchins was killed by a gun that Baldwin was holding on the Rust movie set. 3 police officers involved in the investigation took the stand. Baldwin's attorney also grilled a crime scene technician about how live rounds made it onto the film set.
I do not have any physical evidence to show where the live rounds originated from.
There is zero evidence in this case that
That is kind of
Baldwin
crazy.
brought
Can you
a live
imagine?
round onto set, correct?
Can you imagine? Shooting a movie. He did say some pretty disturbing things, and his actions leading up to shooting that woman with what ended up being a live round, it's pretty concerning, his actions and his behavior. He's a Hollywood celebrity, what's new? Could you imagine, just say that Alec Baldwin is benevolent. Imagine you're shooting a movie and you shoot someone because there was a live round. Why? When are live rounds ever used in movies? I'm not a prop guy. So I don't know. I'm not sure. That would be crazy. Here we go. CNN isn't streaming it. I was hoping and praying that CNN would be streaming it. That's who we want to watch.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
So CNN is, in fact,
justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the
They
Constitution.
scheduled it for 6:55
Supreme Court
at
decision
like
to end
5:30,
affirmative
so they must
action in
have known.
college admissions. Uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this.
We can't listen anymore, this hogwash. I want to know what Biden is doing right now. So, do you think Peter Doocy will be in? They've got to be having it in the White House. There's no way that they've transported him somewhere else, but all this NATO stuff is going on, so it's hard to say whether he's going to be at the White House or not. It's curious. I wonder if Peter Doocy is going to be there, he is going to rip him. Well, if any honest supporter, reporter, journalist is going to be there, they're going to rip him. So I'm curious to see where that'll be. It's a press conference. It's got to be at the White House, meaning the White House press correspondents will be there, namely Peter Doocy, which I hope he is. But earlier, before the delay in this press conference, for 30 minutes later, we were looking at Joe Biden's track record. Off memory, and you don't have to have too, as Joe Scarborough says, too cogent a memory. In fact, we ought to watch that. You don't have to have too cogent a memory to remember all of his policies. And you know what his olive leaf is, or his olive branch is? His olive branch is that he got rid of airline junk fees, credit card junk fees, withdrawal or overdraft, capped overdraft fees. He beat Medicare. That's a big one. I think that's what all of the left was wanting to see. Let's see. We'll get up here. Yeah, his track record, again, is that of, well, quite frankly, the worst president in American history. We're lucky to have a situation where it's so easy. Could you imagine a wolf in sheep's clothing in this election? That would be scary. If we had another Obama, one that we know is corrupt, if Joe Biden was cogent, as Joe Scarborough says, that would be terrifying, because we know how bad he is, but he's also capable of winning. The American public knows illegals can vote because the SAVE Act is not going to get passed. It'll get vetoed by Joe Biden. None of the valuable information we know, and the majority of Americans know at this point, at least some of the corruption, and how bad the economy is and how much worse their life is under Joe Biden. Imagine if he was fluent, capable, poignant, deceptive, and cunning. Then we're in really big trouble, because people can see the austerity, the beautiful appearance of a person who seems to have your best interest at heart when you know it's wrong, but it feels so right. MK Ultra programming yet again, then we'd really be in trouble, because we're looking into the destruction of our country with virtually no way to save it, because he's going to get the people who don't know enough's vote, and he's going to get the illegals vote. Now, the people who don't know enough just know that this guy can't even formulate a coherent sentence, so he can't lead our country. I guess I'm going to go with the guy with 92 felonies, and that's how they would frame it, literally. I'm going to have to vote for the guy with 92 felonies because the other guy has dementia, but they don't realize that those felonies are only on Trump's record because we live in a banana republic. So we're blessed. Everything happens for a reason. If Trump would have won in 2020, it would have continued the reign of terror from the Democrats and saying that Trump is Hitler, he's the end of democracy, yada, he'll never leave. Well, he already left once. And that period of time, this great awakening has happened. Mind you, we had COVID. We've got 2 new wars, we've got illegals killing citizens in the street that are getting released without bail, without any criminal record. We've got gender transitioning for kids. The world is on fire, folks. People wouldn't have recognized how much better they had it. They wouldn't realize how bad things are if Trump would have won, because they would only see things for how bad the media tells them it is. Now the media is in the dumpster, literally the dumpster, and that's because their credibility has been shot. People saw what happened during the Trump administration for 4 years. They saw the fact that it was all spun against Trump, and now they've seen 4 years, 3.5 years of it spinning against Trump and spinning for Biden. Now they see that the media has been spinning it this whole time, that Joe Biden is cogent, he's cognitively there. They see the war, they see the preferential treatment of other countries over our own. People wouldn't have woke up to this extent had we not had Joe Biden win the presidency. That's case in point. And they had time to do their research when they were locked at home and forced to get a gene therapy that is, safe and effective, that is now being exposed for the 3rd shot, increasing the likelihood of you dying by 35%, and you having long COVID. Well, you had long VA, safe and effective. Long, safe, and effective. That's what we're going to call it. Long, safe, and effective. All of these things were completely necessary to inch people along over time. Bring them up to terms. The cognitive dissonance was in place. When Trump was in office, they had cognitive dissonance. They could not accept that things were what we were saying they were this entire time. Then they couldn't leave their house without a face diaper on. Then they got sick. Then they got safe and effective injured. They saw the authoritarian regime with its mask off completely. So all was completely necessary. Let's see here. I'm trying to get our cogent clip up. Here we go.
Guy's mental state, I've said it for years now. He's cogent.
This is the funniest
but
thing I've ever heard.
Comparing that guy's mental state, I've said it for years now. He's cogent. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, I don't know if people know this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth.
F you if you can't handle the truth.
This version can't handle the truth. To tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. And you But compare.
Yeah, cogent. Joe Biden's cogent. Let's see where we're at here again.
The end of affirmative action. Now
Coming up on a monumental moment in history, folks.
The way we work. The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7.
But what about this question that a lot of reporters have asked very prominent Democrats, members of Congress, state governors,
Folks, I'm gonna go
whether or not Biden
get some coffee
should take
and
another
prepare.
cognition test or physical fitness test of the like. And so I will be looking for whether or not that's going to be a question posed to him. Remember, Brian,
should he leave?
He hasn't taken one since
84%.
February. And so I'm not a doctor. We're not doctors here. But if you're
Dr.
81
Kevin
years
O'Connor
old,
is. He's just
and
a
you have
doctor
all these
completely
questions surrounding you, and you've been in
dereliction
politics
of his
your
duties
entire adult
and
life,
completely disregarding the Hippocratic
wouldn't that
Oath.
be a no-brainer?
I'm gonna go get some coffee
Set the
so that we're
question
ready to go
aside
for when
and
this comes
take
on.
a cognition
I'll be right
test,
back.
Brian.
I'll be right back.
Absolutely. I think
And
if
we've
you
got.
had
All right. We also know that with this question at the
I'll
bottom
be
of
right
your
back
screen
in
there,
just a
about
moment. Gonna get some
4,000
coffee,
of you
get a drink.
have voted. We thank
We'll be
you
back
for
with
your
you in
input.
just
We
a
thank
minute.
you for
Enjoy
your
this,
engagement. It's
and,
a key question. Not only you
we'll be
are
right back.
asking yourselves, if you're watching live now, but so many other Americans are asking themselves this question. So many prominent Democrats are asking themselves that question. Many members of the Democratic electorate, the Democratic base of support for President Biden, are asking that question as well here. So I think Corella Hart and I were discussing this. We've been reporting this all throughout the day. Just in the last day, 4 more House Democrats have come out urging President Biden to step aside, to withdraw from the race. The latest, Correll, Arizona Democrat Greg Stanton, and also Hawaii Democrat Ed Case. So the number now is at 14. It stands at 14. Brian, you and I were just discussing, will that number go up or will that number go down after the press conference here? And of course, we were discussing as well somewhat of a inadvertent yet major gaffe President Biden made in the last hour, referring to President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine as President Putin. Obviously, that's a huge gasp coming at the tail end of the NATO summit, when the entire NATO summit has been about the war in Ukraine and Putin's aggression against Ukraine there. So we're seeing a lot of reaction coming in from that as well here. I believe we have that. We have that moment. Let's play that yet again for the viewer in case they might have missed it live.
That's what the compact says, loudly and clearly. And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. Who's going to beat President Putin? President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Thank you so much.
That's what the compact says.
All right, so you heard that there, President Biden, with that slip up at the NATO summit. This is the Ukraine compact, the Ukraine element of the summit there. It's been a key feature for the last almost 72 hours. We have been speaking about it with some of our national security experts and analysts, talking about Ukraine's eventual and inevitable path to NATO membership. It's ways away, but it was front and center in some of these key conversations today as well. We'll be getting into some of the key objectives and priorities of the last day of the NATO summit a little bit later on tonight. But the story of the hour is, of course, President Biden's press conference that he will be holding at the tail end of the NATO summit. We're told it's going to be taking place in just about possibly 5 minutes' time. It's about 30 minutes delayed here. All eyes will be on President Biden and his performance. How scripted will this be, or how not scripted, how non-contrived will this be? That's something I'm going to be looking for. Of course, so many of these fears and concerns from especially Democrats have said Biden is too stage managed, that he needs to be more open, be more available, talk off the cuff there. You can see they're getting the camera ready. They're getting the mics ready there as well. So we also have some more reaction coming in from some of these House Democrats who haven't essentially said he should exit the race, but have acknowledged that they have concerns. And remember, this key meeting took place today amongst Senate Democrats with senior Biden White House officials and campaign officials. Now, before the meeting today, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet said this: if they stay as they are, it's likely Donald Trump will win the election and will lose the Senate and lose the House. 2 days ago, Michael Bennet said that on CNN, and he is staying by those comments. Now, the CBC chair, that's the Congressional Black Caucus, who you can make the argument, are right now President Biden's most virulent backers and supporters. The chairman of the CBC, Stephen Horsford, says this: so it's not only the presidency, but it's the House of Representatives. All of us should be focused on one thing, and that is making sure that every eligible voter knows how important it is to cast their vote this November. So, Karel O'Hara joining me. Karel, you can see in some of these comments and statements that I'm reading, it's not just about the White House that Democrats are concerned about. It's about these down-ballot races. Remember, Democrats, of course, they want to keep control of the Senate, and they want to regain control of the House.
Back again. Mark my words.
And from these statements that I just read, the concerns are about down-ballot races. You know, depending on Biden's performance and all the baggage that has come with it, and all the questions about his mental and physical acuity, this is starting to seep into some of those questions about swing district races, Senate races as well. There's a lot of Senate Democratic incumbents who are up for re-election, who are facing tough Republican prospects, especially in some of these battleground states here. When you talk about swing districts, though, many of the House Democrats who have already called on Biden to step aside come from swing districts, and that includes Angie Craig of Minnesota, that includes Pat Ryan of New York, that includes Hillary Scholten today of Michigan as well here. So that's the politics at play. It's not only about can Biden
should be starting here in the next
4 more years in the White House. It's about will this affect
share the stream,
down ballot races for the House and for the Senate. And you've also had some of these Democrats not entirely say Biden should step out of the race, but just pure acknowledgement that he will lose to Trump. We've had 3 House Democrats
I agree with
say
every
that
word
in
you
interviews.
said.
They're not calling for Biden not to seek
Assange
re-election.
9/11
they just go even further and say, well, Trump is going to win.
Agree.
Anyway, so it's somewhat of an implicit acknowledgement, possibly, that they also believe Biden should not run for re-election as well here. So we are just waiting. We're just told we're minutes away from the start of this press conference. We'll be airing it in full. Obviously, we'll also be bringing in more reporters who cover politics day in, day out to respond after the press conference is all said and done here. So I think at least the political establishment there in Washington and across the country are watching President Biden, or will be watching his every move, what he says, what he doesn't say, the questions that he responds to. And of course, as journalists, I know you probably have questions you wanted to ask President Biden. I have a long list of questions I want to ask President Biden, especially in the wake of this debate performance 2 weeks ago. And so it has been 2 weeks, but the story has not gone away. No matter how much the Biden White House, no matter how much the Biden campaign wants it to go away. Remember, Biden sent that letter to House Democrats 2 days ago. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, he said, enough of this. I'm not going anywhere.
686
I'm the nominee.
here
Essentially,
on
get
X.
over it.
I'm not sure how many are concurrent,
even
but
from that declarative letter to
we've got our notes ready.
You've still seen some
We're going to notate memorable moments. This video
especially from Democratic leadership, Schumer, Pelosi,
my ancestors were
essentially hedge.
We're going to make some videos after this press conference. But we'll probably pull some stuff from the stream, post some videos, but we'll also be recapping the debate,
as we go into
the press conference in a full-length video. I think the content, I think this is like,
to allay some of these concerns.
Is this
we
the
have
most,
a live picture there inside the NATO summit where
is this the most important press conference in American
history?
history?
Will take place. Of course, we know Biden just spoke with the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky.
Look at that.
And something that's so interesting that Brian Sobel said, Karel,
Look at that daily
about
schedule.
Preparation.
That's definitely not Joe Biden's.
Not with just debates.
This is Joe Biden's daily schedule.
But also with press conferences. Remember, that was one of the key excuses and justifications the Biden camp had said in the days after the debate. His staff over-prepared him.
Here we go. I'm gonna write Biden's schedule
in the
for
very
each
first
day.
week after
Daily
his
schedule.
Debate performance. And so when you
go.
want to talk about
Wake up
over-preparation for debates
at
and
11
press
a.m.
conferences, is that a good
and
enough excuse
4 p.m.
if your performance
is
not as top-notch?
There we go.
You know, Andrew,
so you see that daily schedule back there? That's not Joe Biden's schedule. Here's Joe Biden's schedule. 11 a.m., wake up, 4 p.m., call it lit. What's that in between? Nothing.
What the plan would be going forward if Biden were to choose, let's say, to drop his candidacy for the presidency? I've also seen that there's an article right now, apparently maybe the Vice President Kamala Harris being prepped against her debate skills with former President Donald Trump. What really would be the move here?
That would be a disaster.
So what's so interesting about that question, and so many people have that question, I myself do, is that Vice President Harris and the Biden campaign have already committed to a vice presidential debate, I believe with CBS News sometime either in late July or early August.
I'm dying to watch CNN. Here we go, boys and girls.
Can't happen until Trump
Here we
picks
go.
his running mate.
Mute. Here we go. Here we go. This is the moment. An empty podium. As tantalizing as this is, musically great. What are we doing? Who is this small fry? She'll look like a meerkat. Serious against me. Jesus lost his job. That's how I'm going to start my live streams. Just go. Come on, Joe. Walk out here. Roll out on your skateboard as well. The 12-inch version. Oh my gosh. Come on. Here we go. Get the water. There's the... Yep. She dropped the amphetamines off here beside the cup. Here we go. Here we go. Maybe. Folks, if you haven't yet, please, if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe. Share if you're on X. Please. Share. Repost. Like. Tell your friends, tell your family. This is going to be excellent. She's conducting, yes. It's vodka. Yep, maybe vodka. vodka with a... Oh, she's on the phone. Joe's at... Wait, what? Joe's in Russia with President Putin? He was just on stage with him for the NATO summit. Yeah, she doesn't... Nobody knows where he is. Here. Right here. There's microphones. Those are ice cream cones. Come on, Joe. I'm running late here. Some of us have a family that we don't take showers with. They're really prepping for this, guys. Holy cow. This is insane. Make sure the flag looks right. Yeah, just, they're diverting. Yeah, that's what they're... Yeah, they're trying to stand them up, but they're going to get the flagpole. They're going to get the flagpole. They get the flag off, move the other one to the center. Tie the flag to his back to stand him up straight. They know they're in frame right now. Let's go. I feel like I'm at the opera. I feel like, I mean, Trump, if Trump were doing this, he would have, yeah, hold on. Trump would have Proud to Be an American. He'd have Queen playing right now. He'd have AC/DC playing. And he would stride out on that stage. Yeah, Bon Jovi. He'd walk out there proudly and say, who's first? Joe's going to come out and say, where's Corn Pop? Corn Pop's here. Guys, if you're new to the stream, if you're in here for the first time, or you've been in here since the beginning of the stream, an hour and a half ago, when the press conference was supposed to start long ago, please like and share, and let's enjoy this momentous moment together, as it will be one for the history books, literally. And we'll be publishing several videos out of this, I'm sure. Yeah, Eddie, they're absolutely stalling. They know they are. Those flags were perfectly fine before. Here. Now, see, what's even better is we've got the subtitles. So if CNN is really trying to axe Joe, they're going to have them move these around. They're going to have the subtitles on. I can't hear them saying here. They're going to have these subtitles on the whole time. And we'll be able to hear them say, Joe, over here, right there. No, not over there, over here. Hold on, Joe. Talk about Trump being Hitler. We need to also, here, I'm going to make a note of this. You guys count with me. If I miss one, put it in the chat. Ear touches. Just thought of this. So I noticed in the debate, he kept messing with his ear, right? It's an earpiece. Without question. And he still couldn't say anything coherent except for that he beat Medicare. Subtitles are for Joe. A most reprehensible statement to make for anybody on the left. Medicare is something that many people care about. Everyone should care in some form, shape, or form about Medicare. and Social Security. But when you say you beat Medicare, well, that was the nail in the coffin. But regardless, he made no coherent statements. He couldn't finish a sentence, and he went like this the whole time. So his ear touches. The headpiece didn't work, but he touched his ear a bunch of times. In a 90-minute debate, I bet he touched his ear every 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You know, you have Parkinson's, you have dementia, whatever you have. You're not thinking coherently for once. You're not thinking cogently about things that you should or shouldn't do or say. So we're going to count his ear touches. I guarantee you he will touch his ear a multitude of times. Guarantee you. And thank you guys. I can see we're looking pretty good on X. If you guys have any issues with anything, let me know. But keep sharing the stream. Let's get this thing up. If you're new here, if you don't follow me, I appreciate you spending time with me. We're going to enjoy this press conference together. The day that will live in infamy forever. Because if he comes out and he's cogent, well, we're going to know he's on the good stuff. But if he comes out and he's his normal self, well, we're going to have content for years to come. Screen record this, post it as much as you want. I'm not a hawk for content, which I guess you can crop me out of it if you want, but screen record it, post it. I mean, do whatever you got to do, right? Because this, I can only assume that there will be. My bet is, if he goes for 20 and 30 minutes, there will be 5 viral moments at least. But it's going to be just him. Can you imagine? This is better than watching a Trump rally. Almost. Oh, 10 quid. I didn't see your comment, man. I'm sorry. Is this big boy press conference an own goal or the setup to Biden's assassination by news conference? I think the Dems set this press conference to push him to fail, so definitely that he will have to resign. Then the land will be free for the candidate to choose. You're exactly right, 10 quid, but the problem is he can resign, but how do they skirt around the Kamala issue? See, how they navigate that is going to be very telling. Because you have the perfect candidate as far as DEI goes, as far as social justice goes. You've got the perfect candidate in Kamala Harris. You've got a black woman. You've got a minority. You've got a progressive leftist. You've got someone who parrots every talking point you put in front of her. But she is as bad as Joe. Her oratory skills are as bad as Joe Biden's. Because for everything that once was, or ever will be, was indistinguishable from things we have never seen. You could say the dumbest thing you've ever heard, and she said, she's the worst candidate. She's a worse candidate than Joe. And if she steps on the stage for a debate with Donald Trump, 10 quid, that would be even more comical than a Joe Biden debate with Trump in different respects. Her track record's worse than Joe's. And before we started the live stream, and we were recapping some of Joe's biggest highlights, such as war, destroying the economy, and so forth, and the illegals coming into our nation, free flow. We looked at her track record, at least briefly, and it's terrifying what she did to innocent black men in the state of California as the Attorney General and the District Attorney, or ADA. Maybe the medicine wall. If they tried to do what they did in the debate and give it to them right before the debate, it takes time to kick in. Maybe they did it a little too early this time. And now they've got to pump him full again. Yeah, I think they got to pump him full again. And so that's why they got the people back there moving the flag around, because they've got the shot put in his rear end. That would be my vote. That would be my vote. If you haven't shared the stream yet, please share it. We're all anxiously waiting for this clown to come on the stage. He's an hour late already. Trying to build up suspense or trying to get more drugs in his system. Your guess is as good as mine. Come on, here we go. Is this the announcement? Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get the word out. Okay. There. Where's the little girl, Eddie? Where's she at? She's supposed to be up in the front with this. So, I think I should reiterate to you guys. This is supposed to be the big boy press conference. Whatever that means. But that should set the stage for how horrible this is about to be. No. Yeah, talking to my fiance, guys. He just called Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, President Putin. I swear he did. I swear he did. Most of the people in my chat are of the belief that this is Joe Biden's non-lethal assassination. I'm about to put the Revenge of the Sith music on, but I'll probably get copyrighted. Maybe if I put the gender fluid Revenge of the Sith on from the Acolyte, they wouldn't pull it out. It's crazy how delicate you have to be with the content that you use on YouTube. And it's been a fever pitch lately because half of the content I've posted recently. Drop it. Yep. Drop it. I'll show you guys. She's trying to eat something she's not supposed to eat. Here's the real press conference, guys. What do you think they're, honestly, put in the chat, what do you think they're doing? The press are being coached. That is, you've been on fire, Eddie. Let's say you're right. Who do we see in there? Is that... No? There's Peter Ducey. Trying to wake him up. Yeah, it is after 4 p.m. Anytime after noon, he's shot. Can't imagine. I'm trying to be patient here, but I think we might just have to go watch some more Joe Biden brain compilations. Or we can go do some more deep dives into his corruption. I'm always cool with that. This Bandcamp stuff, though, is going to drive me insane. This is like sitting in the line for a ride. This looks like a Disney attraction. Like, the music, the seal here, it's like a Disney attraction. Yeah. I'll turn down. Thanks for that, Eddie. There we go. Appreciate you, Eddie. Sorry about that, guys. While we wait, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna put this tantalizing scene up here for a moment. I gotta get my dog out of here. Just hold tight, folks. Brace for impact. He'll be here at some point, hurtling towards Earth like a meteorite moving at snail speed. Jeez. Be right back. Alright guys, well, while we wait, let's share the stream. I don't know if this guy's even alive. Maybe they... I don't know. Yep. Majestic mind controllers. I'm not... And there's no statement made. I'm checking X right now. No statement made. No statement made. I'm trying to scroll through X here and see... And this is only making him look even worse. Like, what's the speculation? This was supposed to start at 5:30, guys. 2 hours. Yeah, I'm not seeing any updates. Are you guys seeing anything as to where the heck he is? Let's check. Let's check Harry Sisson. He's probably saying Joe Biden is playing the late to the party card, and this is the strength of 48 laws of power. Joe Biden power move. He is cogent. Look at this.
Distinguished guests, the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Here he is. Let's go, guys.
Thank you. Please be seated. Well, good evening.
All right.
We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success.
One clear throat. I'm going to put it.
It's especially momentous because it represented the 75th year, the most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked.
Thank you, Commotion World.
Because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought, as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved.
We're counting clear throats.
NATO's not only stronger,
ear touches.
NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance. And it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile,
there's three.
My predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history.
4 clear throats.
And that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did and exactly what we'll continue to do. Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than a political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue.
Security.
Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know the answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We are an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to 3 other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us
because he wants to produce them.
That would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive. And I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
Oh my gosh.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
He's going to be mad about that.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number
Vice
one.
President Trump.
The fact is that the consideration
another clear throat
is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now.
No, he's got the lowest.
Later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We got more work to finish. There's so much, we made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million, so things are moving.
Yep.
We got more to go. Working class people still need help.
No, that's 5.
Corporate greed is still at large. The prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down, and so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
7.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about your, you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today.
I knew they would bring it up.
And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing by leading this conference?
Huh?
Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests
category 2
that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is...
there it is. There's no one.
Well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time.
I've got a bumbling category too that goes in there.
A world leader who didn't think it was.
And we'll count that as a gaffe as well.
Sorry, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Another clear throat. That's 8.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well,
look, there's another one.
I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward can't do that. It's going to cause inflation. Things are going to skyrocket. The debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists?
What are you hearing now?
16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plan so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory. That if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what?
Clear throat.
Find me an mainstream economist who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate.
That's a bumbling.
But corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. Doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit.
Corporations were bad.
It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase of corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union? Not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history.
He crushed
Not a joke.
The steel workers.
Guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better.
Oh, my.
Everybody does better.
It's whispering.
And we talk about how, for example, when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry is in the United States. Everybody does. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world. Send the product over there and import the product. What have we not done? And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Europe. To Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. Because we're going to continue. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world. Remember how I got? You have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested. There's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing just coming in the bean. Like homes are limited. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. I've been talking, but it's happening. It's happening. And it's going to grow economies all through. And by the way, red states and blue states. Matter of fact, there's as much in red states as blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. And like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well. But the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning. I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you look at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? Look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Some with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that's what it was about.
Anyway.
That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things. They add things all the time. It's very end.
He's whispered 3 times.
I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
He's whispered 3 times.
I'm sorry. Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that?
Sorry, guys.
And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, and the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or on some matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it.
That is a ghoul.
There's no indication of that yet.
That is a ghoul.
None.
That is a ghoul. Folks, look.
Who I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the U.S. have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States.
He is. He's a globalist.
But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago.
Like, let's have some bipartisan,
So my question is,
this is ridiculous.
do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible U.S. disengagement?
Well, look.
There's another look.
I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I've not had any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. He'd be a disaster. He'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO, or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you, from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera.
It's a gaffe.
And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine. I said, you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office. I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe, I can't recall what he said in public in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. We were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just met we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world.
How are we making the world
safer? The Cold War is over.
Safer?
The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest
the New World Order.
I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. We're just going to get stronger.
Yeah, 5-0.
David Sanger.
550. Where's it? 55-0.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President,
handpicked.
The NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia. and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi,
in 2 years,
that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do, what they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating. They're getting access to additional. They're not supplying weapons themselves. They're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through.
Of course, because he was.
And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that
business partners with him made money from the CCP.
Xi believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we cannot, you have to make clear, China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so we, for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well. If you want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules. And you don't have the authority, and you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public. And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them in, as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to. It came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems.
He started to
and
crumble.
so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with one of my colleagues,
getting worse
my
and worse.
European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, it's what Russia's trying to figure out. That they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to build the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need.
And
that
that's
was the
counts as a
discussion
gap and
as well.
bumbling. That's 11 gaps.
I'm sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look,
there's another look. It's 5.
Like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him.
Yeah, to see how you
I
can
have no good
personal
reason to
business
talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior.
You go meet with him to end the war.
But there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with.
But
I understand the generic point.
Fighting proxy war
is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior.
That makes
the idea. Look, Putin's got a problem.
Look.
First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think that Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory.
Yeah,
they've not been very
people with
successful.
Down syndrome and
They've
pregnant
caused
women
horrible
basically in
damage, loss of life. But they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is.
That's a gaffe.
And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anyone else has. We just put together today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on the group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations.
Bumbling.
And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target, and I don't take it lightly. Sam from NPR.
List of people that I can call on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier,
NPR,
you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard.
Millions of dollars on
and Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here cover me all the time have heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there.
Spoiler alert,
I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port we attached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on, because it was not no one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north. I said, don't make the same mistake we made.
Oh, he
don't
just
think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. we'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire, and get those. And by the way, look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway.
Bridge candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth, most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress, to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. 15. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and major legislation hadn't inherited what I did, and we just moved things along. Anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform your
Am I using that way, you say?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out. For the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway. And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events from Wisconsin to North Carolina to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. North Carolina, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters, I forget exactly how many, I don't want to cite a number and then find out I'm off, but we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized, we're moving, And that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around. More children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press said, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. In Philadelphia, democracy is not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege based on this court? Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025? Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education, make sure, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little neurological problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip a lot. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it. Creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if age does, if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out, hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day, I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 knocks? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So I am not opposed. If my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia? And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I got overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look. I'll end this with this.
Whispers.
I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. Now talk red and blue. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of a candidate. If they think that, I don't recall running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day. So a lot can happen. But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that. Okay. Thank you.
This ends tonight's press conference. Thanks, everybody. This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
That was a long endeavor, guys. And I apologize for the camera going off. Had an issue with the camera. That was I don't know. You all put in the chat what your thoughts were. I think it was, well, quite frankly, I'm curious to see what CNN says about it. He was more cogent. I'd like to get some live reactions. Let's see if we have anything live from CNN. I thought that he was a little more cogent than I expected. That being said, it was not a great showing. And let's go over the stats here with the numbers that matter. Again, you all put in the chat what you thought of the debate. It was, or not the debate, the press conference. It was not a big boy press conference. There were many things he was misleading on. The consumer price index is over 20% higher than it was 3.5 years ago, even during COVID. Inflation is not down. There are lies, there are damn lies. There's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. The inflation rate can be presented in any way you want it to be presented. You just have to change the variable with which you're trying to calculate. And under no circumstances is inflation down. It's at record highs. In interest rates, the Fed has already said they're effectively manipulating the economy by printing money and increasing/decreasing the interest rate in ways that nobody understands. And they try to say, oh, we're trying to stymie inflation. No, what you're trying to do is create a housing market bubble that they say has been there for a long time. Consumer behavior doesn't follow any logical trend. People will go and get a house if they want to get a house. And in my area, people are still moving here. People are still buying. People are still selling. Interest rate notwithstanding, the economy is in the dump. He says that he would talk to any world leader, and he's been talking to every world leader. He won't talk to Putin, but he would talk to Putin if Putin called. So he said Donald Trump said Russia invading Ukraine was genius. Well, there's no context given. That's not what he said. Yeah, Eddie says, I still buy bread. Prices fell. So prices fell last week. Inflation is down. Blatant lie. Gave list of people to call on. He was given a list of people to call on. There were no hard-hitting questions. There were questions that were, you're so old. You make mistakes. What are you going to do? Is Kamala Harris a good replacement? If you were to step down, would Kamala Harris make a good candidate? Could she beat Trump? Okay, these are questions. They're blatantly obvious questions that need to be asked, but they weren't hard-hitting. There wasn't a, it was just a tongue bath for Joe Biden. Essentially, easy questions to answer. He called Trump Vice President Trump. Instead of referring to his vice president as Kamala, her name, he said Vice President Trump. He says 55-0 instead of saying 50. And to close this out, I enjoyed it to a degree because you could hear what he was saying. He whispered a total of 5 times, like creepy whisper. He bumbled 5 times. He said, look, 6. These are the ones I caught. I could be slightly off. He says, look, 6 times. Look, Jack. Gaffes, he had 16 gaffes. Clear his throat, surprisingly, he had 10. These are the ones I caught. The most important, sorry, my daughter's going crazy. The most prevalent thing that he did that was the most shocking, I would say, were the pauses, the gaps in his speech that really could only be discerned as confusion. And he had that look on his face several times. He couldn't find the name with the name he was on in his notes, the list of pre-prepared journalists that he was to call on, reporters. And overall, I would say I would give him a 6. I think it was better than I expected. But when you set the bar down here, if your standard is here for normal people, and you set the bar down here, well, it's pretty easy to meet that bar. He talked. He had some bumbling moments. He had some gaffes. He cleared his throat repetitively. And these are things I mentioned specifically because the Parkinsons and the doctors that even MSNBC, NBC, and CNN have had on, they've said these are the facial features being rigid, his body movements being rigid, the way that he communicates, whispered, very monotone. And he did yell at one point about guns and needing gun control and how Trump is basically not going to do anything about guns. What you need to do about guns is you need to take them out of the bad guy's hands, not the good. We know this. But I mean, yeah, like I said, you set the bar way down here, and he performs way down here or maybe just above. That does not mean that it was a great performance. It just means he was able to talk effectively. So, yeah, I apologize for the camera going off there for a moment. Had some technical issues. But I would say, again, it just wasn't a horrible one. Wasn't a great one either. It was about what I expected. I'm curious. We'll make a video. I'll publish the press conference, the recap, and I'll recap it again later or tomorrow and publish a video. What do we expect? Kamala Harris, if they decide to run her, would be the biggest mistake ever. She's less likable than Joe Biden, even with dementia and Parkinson's and his corruption. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Post the stream, share. We'll be back again with another one of these, probably with the next Trump rally. It's been a while since we streamed, unfortunately, due to life. So appreciate you for tuning in. Share the stream. We'll be back here soon. Joe Biden sucks. Let's make America great again. Thank you, guys.